Greetings, everyone. My name is Costas Torregas. I'm a NAPA Fellow and completing my 30th year as a NAPA Fellow. Every 4 years around election time, NAPA does a great thing, which is to organize some thoughts around the incoming administration. What should they know? What might they consider? And what might they deploy as a new administration come the next year? 2020 is no different. We've come together and identified 11 other great challenges, in addition to our data privacy and security challenge. But for the three of us that are on the call today, these are very important topics, and therefore we agreed, along with a sterling group of other fellows, to present to you, the NAPA Fellowship, and hopefully to the incoming administration, some ideas around data privacy and security. In addition to myself, who had the responsibility to chair the group, we had Jane Fountain, who's on the call. We had Jim Handler, who was on the call. But in addition, we had Nick Hart, Mark Rieger, Priscilla Reagan, and Peter Vinolka. Data privacy and security is pervasive. It has become a major concern, not only for around elections and voting, but in every aspect of our lives. As a consequence, the group that you see before you, the working group that you see before you, decided to organize a report with some highlights. And I'd like to ask my co-panelists to weigh in and begin the discussion of what led us to this topic and how did we branch out.
It's often said that there's a trade-off between privacy and security, that you have to give up privacy to get more security. But we can't live in a society where we give up so much privacy in order to get security that we no longer have a democracy. So at the crux of this issue is this supposed trade-off, and hopefully the ability to find win-win spaces that don't force us into zero-sum types of decisions. There has been a tremendous amount of work going on in different parts of the government, in business, in state and local governments, around privacy and security for a very long time. But we seem to have reached the point in our society and other societies where consumer trust is breaking down. People don't want to be tracked. They don't want to be surveilled. They're becoming increasingly aware that facial recognition technologies, that the buying and selling of their data is going on, and they are rightly concerned about that. At the same time, when the internet began, which seems not very long ago, like the US does with most technology developments, we try to let the innovation run without over-regulating it. So we've reached a point with a maturation of use of data in society that we really need a regulatory infrastructure that is not so heavy that it stifles innovation or freedom, but that it gives us a joint space. I guess the other comment I would make at the outset is that there's a lot to learn or to think about in terms of the policymaking process, institutional change, and a variety of other kind of public management, public administration issues, in addition to the information science and data science aspects of this that have to be brought together. So it's an area where we need experts from a variety of different areas. Turn it over to you, Jim.
Yeah, and I would add, just to put some context around this, we're really focused mostly in this report on kind of the individual security and privacy. That is, there's significant work in many places on, protecting national infrastructure and national defense, those kind of things. We're really looking more at an individual's data, whether they have control of their data, whether they understand how their data is used. We often use simple examples like you may have picked up at your local frozen yogurt store a discount card, and that seems great, and you signed a little thing that said, that information, they can share it. Well, okay, your insurance company could buy that, discover you're diabetic, and raise your rates because you're having the yogurt. Now, you have agreed separately to each of those entities that you'll share certain information, but when it gets combined, you have no control over that. And so another reason we talk to either regulatory frameworks or things like that is this can involve government data mixed with personal data, mixed with, industrial data. Certain of your data, like your health records, are highly protected, but again, they're not protected from being integrated with other kinds of data except through regulatory mechanisms. So we're saying that, there really needs to be a look around this larger issue. I won't go on at great length, but there's been a lot of experimental work showing that even when people understand the little privacy things, even when you make them very explicit, people have strong preconceived notions about what is appropriate and inappropriate contexts of use and things like that, and they have very little to do with the current legal or policy framework. So again, we're saying this is something that really has implications across a very wide range of areas and needs to be looked at.
And just to throw a little bit more fuel to the fire, Jane, you mentioned privacy and security being a constant tension with one another. And the resolution kind of has a big impact on what we call democracy. In addition to privacy and security, I would then put a third one, which is really important for the millennials, the younger generation that's behind us coming up in society, and that is empowerment. Digital activities give tremendous empowerment to the individual. And sometimes the values and the norms that we as individual US citizens have had for many years are not the same as those of a 20 or a 30-year-old who may feel that by sharing information, by allowing the fusion that Jim alluded to, they get more empowerment. They are able to do more things faster, and they're willing to give up something that we might consider very sacred. So the question of who sets the foundations for privacy is also an interesting question. But perhaps rather than to talk about the personal thing, we should shift over now slowly to administration, public administration. National Academy of Public Administration is all about administering the public good. So what are the issues, the key issues that we began to look for to structure recommendations for the incoming administration, whether it's a continuing administration or whether it's a new administration coming in? And you see on the screen 3 major recommendations. In order to give them context, because they talk about commissions and the policy framework, let's kind of dive into each one of them and take a look to see how we might organize the thoughts of those who listen to our report, and of course those who we hope, fingers crossed, that you read our report as well. Give them some structure for it. So who wants to take the first one, the privacy and security one?
I'd be happy to pick this up. Just a step back. So our recommendations are simple, and they're threefold: create a presidential commission on privacy and security, create a workforce advisory commission on cybersecurity, privacy, and then develop and implement a policy framework to protect data, security, and individual privacy. So for a presidential commission, it's a lot of research has shown, and mine included, on cross-agency initiatives, that the way to get forward motion on these whole of government problems that don't lie neatly in any one agency or one or two agencies are through large national convenings. Presidential commission gives you the heft of the White House, some time urgency or time control, and this would bring together senior policymakers, corporate executives, academics, researchers, public interest groups, all of the major stakeholders to engage broadly and to produce actionable outcomes. It's not that there has not been discussion on this issue. There's been a great deal of it. It just hasn't been pushed sufficiently to regulation, legislation, and the kind of shared understanding that most stakeholders are now saying we need. What would we expect this commission to do? To lay out a roadmap, to coordinate existing frameworks, to identify gaps where more research or more work may be needed, to set priorities for the country, and then to chart a path forward. I really want to stress that there are lots of existing contributions and efforts. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. This is not a new topic, so we want to leverage existing work in this area, and that is what the Presidential Commission would be designed to do.
Thanks for that. And of course, needless to say, there's also the challenge of international norms in privacy and security. And you have the GDPR, for example, the General Privacy Regulation from Europe and many other, and then at the sub-national level, the state of California has been very well known for their initiatives in privacy. So we desperately need not to create new things, but to harmonize, synchronize, and cultivate the intersect of all these great contributions that have been made. Before going to the second topic, Jim, did you want to weigh in at all on this one, or shall we move on?
No, let's move on.
I'd like to take the next one, which is another commission for all the good reasons that Jane mentioned. There's so much work being done on the workforce for cybersecurity and privacy. According to the latest statistics, and they don't agree very much on the numbers, but the only common characteristic is they're huge. There are anywhere between hundreds of thousands and millions of jobs, especially in cybersecurity, and of course privacy as well, that comes behind it, that we are lacking as a society, whether it's governmental work or whether it's private sector work. We are short of people that understand the technical difficulties of cybersecurity and how to balance those with the non-technical human dimensions of privacy and security. As a consequence, many different institutions have begun to flourish in the workforce area, but they're sometimes not coordinated. And that's where the problem starts, the coordination of existing good practices. The second thing is you see alphabet soups, the National Science Foundation, the Department of Labor, the Office of Personnel Management, many training organizations like CompTIA and others, academic institutions that create the cannon fodder, as it were, the young men and women, and sometimes the career changers that are going into these new professions of cybersecurity and privacy. We need desperately some kind of a harmonizing strategy to make sure that all these initiatives tend to the ultimate objective we want. I think you may have another slide on the Cybersecurity Commission. Yes, if I could, leveraging on the many good efforts that exist, I wanted to pull out the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, which was an initiative that has drawn much attention. They came up with a report that you see there in March of 2020, and they now have staff and they're beginning to move forward. They came up with 75 recommendations for the cyberspace and how to secure it and how to organize it better. And you can see that they're beginning to talk about draft bills for Congress about a national data security and privacy protection law to recruit, retain, and develop cyber talent. So these opportunities exist now. They're on the ground, but they need to be enhanced and embellished because it's not about any one institution. It's harmonizing the many that are already active in the field. Maybe we should move on to the third recommendation of our report.
So, this is really to develop and implement a policy framework. So much as we were looking at the legislative, as the executive side of this is the legislative equivalent. But in that report that Costas was just mentioning, they talk about the need for some kind of national regulations on data security and privacy. And we're really agreeing with that currently the federal government really doesn't have the framework for this kind of privacy. And whether you're on a anti-regulatory, pro-regulatory, where you stand on this, we have a feeling in this country that those things that excuse me, are geared to protecting civil rights and people's individual rights are crucial to our democracy and the way we think about our democracy. And this is obviously one of those key areas where we've, been more than willing to look at medical regulation, food safety, other kinds of things. This whole IT space has been pretty much very difficult to look at. And, there's a lot going on. It has a tendency to get politicized and things like that. But here we're really focusing on a core of this, which many people, and we cite in our report a number of places to look for more information, that this is something we can get our hands around, that there are frameworks that have been proposed under the previous and this administration, and that, it's really to look at how to turn that into policy.
Great. Jane, do you want to weigh in a little bit on this?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons this is coming to a tipping point, the realization and a confluence of interests around moving these policies forward, is that you have not only increasing public concern and this problem of trust, but you have, for example, here under some existing initiatives, the one at the bottom, the Business Roundtable last year sends a letter to the Congress saying, please formulate a regulatory environment for us. Why? The second bullet point from the bottom, we are beginning to see state level privacy legislation, and in some cases for drones, for face recognition, local and municipal level regulations. We're going to end up with a country that has this patchwork of different regulations. That's horrible for the business environment, and it's not a particularly good way to make regulation. So the business community has come to the realization that it's better to have a national framework. They obviously have a strong voices, because industry interests differ from, say, telecom to consumer to finance, and other industries as well. And at the same time, we have already built into Government Performance and Results Act, which requires President cross-agency priority goals. This is a legislation that was originally passed in the 90s and then the Modernization Act in 2010. The first three priority goals are already IT modernization, data accountability and transparency, and building the workforce for the 21st century. So you can hop on those, amplify them, deepen them, and extend these privacy and security issues to those areas. The U.S. Commission on Evidence-Based Policymaking has been working consistently in this area, and this is really Jim's area and that of others, privacy-preserving approaches, and the building out of roles and capabilities in the Federal Data Service, National Secure Data Service, and then over on the commerce and NTIA side, they've been holding stakeholder meetings. So there are a lot of different parts of the government and the society that are working on this. So we want to explore and leverage the shared space to benefit our society and our economy.
Great.
And the only thing I would throw into that, Jane, I think you alluded to it, but I think it's really crucial, is many people think there will be a technological fix to this problem. But like as many technologies, and especially the IT world, these things tend to chase each other. When you solve one, you get another. So again, we're teaching our students in sort of the academic computing space mathematical solutions to these problems, but they're a long way from practical application. And so a policy framework is really crucial to attacking these.
We're coming to the kind of the end of our presentation here. And before concluding, I thought I might ask each of you to summarize a point or two. I'll start by saying our nation is challenged today like no other time. We've had the COVID pandemic. We've had the Black Lives Matter initiative. We've had the economy as a major concern. All those right now have tremendous front-facing property, as it were, on privacy and security. We are turning in droves to machines to help us make it through the COVID environment, to help us create new economic activities from our home, and to perhaps even resolve some of our problems in the racial domain through better education and through supported education. The bottom line is that we are changing as a society, and we are leaning more and more on technology platforms, agreeing totally with Jim, what he said about technology must not take the front seat. But certainly we have to understand it and how to tame it, in a sense. So I think this report of NAPAS comes at a great time. I'll give the floor to my other two colleagues, and then I'll wrap up.
Sure. I just say quickly, just a note on algorithms and institutionalized racism and social inequalities. One of the things we're learning about as we dive into data, and it has effects and ramifications for privacy and security, are effects on the poor, effects on socially marginalized groups, historically marginalized groups, and how algorithms that we're developing, as well as the greater use of data, can have not only beneficial effects, but can have pernicious effects. And so the kind of privacy rights that we might be asking some people to give up in order to get government benefits, for example, or if someone goes to a protest and they realize facial recognition technologies have recorded them as being there and has put them into a database that is then going to label them as a sort of protester or something. These are not exactly new areas, but important areas of this terrain as well.
Thanks, Jim. Jim?
Yeah, I guess my final point would be, we've seen a tremendous politicalization of so many things, and so much of it is focused on data, information, misinformation, and these things. But it turns out that at the heart of this, a lot of the privacy and security issues really do have common agreement all the way across the political spectrum. So I think when we get down to, part of what's behind some of our recommendations is getting a solid foundation, a bedrock at the bottom, where that agreement is, that more of this can be built on, which may solve some of these issues of who controls data, who's allowed to mediate it. There will be a lot of legislation in that space and court work coming out. The judicial branch, I think, will be more and more involved in this. But meanwhile, at the bottom of it could be some fairly clean stuff that fits very nicely into the kind of rights that we've long believed in and which really do cross the aisle.
That's great, Jim. And with that, I'd like to end our little chat and introduction to Grand Challenge number 11, Privacy and Security of the Individual, with a reminder of the very important role the National Academy of Public Administration has to play. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, independent as a voice, and can be a tremendous platform on which to foster and to carry out these multi-stakeholder dialogues that we can actually get to action and impact. Action and impact are very, very important, especially to an incoming administration, whether it's a new mandate for the old administration or whether it's a brand new administration taking over. They'll be looking for quick impact. And I think that inside our report and inside the other 11 Grand Challenge reports, the new administration will find lots to review and hopefully knock on the door of NAPA to ask for assistance. Thanks very much for listening, and this small conversation is finished. Thanks.